You know what would be, in order to differentiate themselves from the UK party, you know what would be a very effective way of doing it on policy? If an Assar was to say this month that if he wins, he's going to cut income tax. So you've got the contrast between the UK party freezing thresholds, people paying a bit more in income tax, but he's saying, and I'm not talking about the higher rate or the top rate for millionaires.
Paul, you're coming round to my way of thinking that last, and it wouldn't be a cut. He could say, "Look, I'm going to bring Scotland level with the rest of the UK," and that would be a cut for us. But he wouldn't be cutting tax; it would just be bringing Scotland into line with the rest of the United Kingdom.
Put pressure on the SNP. It would also be a dividing line between Scottish and UK Labour, show that they go their own way.
Might you have the SNP and Labour going into this Holyrood election saying, well, we'll try and bring the tax take down?
This is the thing, right? So obviously the SNP have increased income tax, and we alluded to this on the last podcast. I wouldn't be surprised if the SNP are thinking in their draft budget in November, can we get away with partially reversing that income tax rise? So I kind of feel like it's who gets in first on this idea is going to own it.
They're in a difficult, because in January they've got the choice. Does Sean and Robertson freeze the thresholds? And obviously the lower thresholds, it's middle income families. If she doesn't freeze the higher tax thresholds, it's portrayed as a tax cut for as the SNP have never tired of telling us, for those with the broadest shoulders and higher earners and people who I would argue aren't, well, I think they certainly wouldn't regard themselves as rich, but that would be portrayed as a tax cut for the rich. Now, are the SNP really going to do that?
Here's the thing. So we've got 6 rates of income tax in Scotland as a result of the changes made by the SNP.
Only 3 in the rest of the UK.
They could look at, say, the basic rate, which is on income between 15,398 to around 27 grand, and then the intermediate rate, which is about 27 grand to 43 grand. They could focus on those rates, maybe even just the basic rate, and just not touch the higher rates. That would be a cheaper way that probably disproportionately benefits lower and middle income voters.
Yeah, and that could be argued as a progressive tax cutting measure. And if like folk like me who are interested in making life better for poor people, that makes total sense, and it continues to proportionately put the burden on those with the broadest shoulders. And I think people who do earn middle incomes should pay more. I think that's how it should be.
But it would. There is a choice to be made. Yeah. So look, I'm looking here. The 42% higher rate. The higher rate starts at 43,663. I think in the rest of the UK, the higher rate is 40%, and it starts at 50 grand.
Yeah.
So if they freeze the 42, more and more people are going to be dragged into that higher rate. At 43,663.
It might be offset though by a cut to the lower rates. Though,
it might be offset too. Yeah.
I think the key point here is that that would sort of change the dial in Scottish politics, and both parties are considering it. It's about who gets in first,
and who presents it as the most virtuous measure, and cutting those rates for lower earners, which benefits everyone eventually, by the way, seems to me quite a good idea. Have you raised this with your Labour pals?
I've said nothing to anyone.
Well, I hope they're listening.
Well, if Labour got in there first, I think that would turn the tables. But if they kept quiet and allowed John Swinney to do it, I think it's game over in terms of the election. If the SNP owned a basic rate tax cut, that would be it.
I think though. The one thing they definitely will do is they'll have the calculators out at Bute House, and they'll be trying to figure out how to get that balance back where they can say more people pay less tax, which we now know isn't the case because the Scottish Fiscal Commission said that hasn't been the case for 2 years. They'll be trying to get this back. So there will be some form of tax cut, I think, for lower earners.
Yeah, and plus, if it comes into force in April, a few weeks before the election, and folk look at their pay packets and see they've got an extra 30 quid, they will notice that.
Yeah, that's it. Going back to your earlier point about the Labour MP who told you that the leadership challenge was
absolute and total bollocks.
I had to asterisk that out with the copy, because, and also I'm amazed that any Labour politician would use such
shocking, isn't it?
I was shocked and stunned when that copy came over. to stick a couple of asterisks in it for our gentle readers. So I don't know who it was, but they're very naughty. I think I've got an idea, but anyway, better not reveal sources.
I'll take that to the grave.
I mean, one other tax, council tax freeze. They got
that's more divisive, I would say. I mean,
it's popular voters.
I think the SNP are preparing their council tax freeze election humdinger right now.
I think it might be.
They probably are,
a council tax.
love it.
I reckon a council tax cap might be. Capping it at 3%, something like that.
I mean, last year we saw all these really high rises, up to 15% in some cases. And I'm sure I remember reading from multiple sources, town hall, council sources saying, look, we're going to go for a bumper rise this year because we're expecting pre-election freeze next year.
I think the best outcome for the SNP and council tax would be if SNP-led councils froze the council tax, Labour councils rose it, and that would be another stick with which to beat them. So I think you might see pressure from both John Swinney and Anas Sarwar on the respective councils, just saying, lads, just keep it as low as possible.
In a wider sense, surely somebody within Scotland, I know the Scottish Parliament's not great at coming up with successful and interesting new plans. It seems to be completely devoid of any ideas. But man, surely we can have higher limits on council tax, so that if you're in a £2 million house, you didn't pay the same as somebody in a house worth 250k. Let's have no upper limit. Let's just let the folk in the big houses pay more. That would get money into the coffers.
I know. Every time John Swinney talks about austerity and how bad the funding settlement is for Westminster, he's left this council tax unreformed in every year.
Aye.
Okay, I mean, there've been tweaks to it, but the fundamentals have remained the same.
And I don't even think it's that hard to put in these upper levels. There's not that many people with 2 million, £1.5 million houses, right? But there's a lot of money to be made off them every year for council tax services. And there's no that you're not going to get voted out of office because you have a go at these millionaire house owners. Get them taxed to the hilt because of their massive properties. And if it's one person living in a property worth 2 million, sell it and move to somewhere cheaper.
Well, this is it. It's literally is a postcode lottery. If we went down that road, people in Edinburgh would end up paying huge council tax bills, and people in Clackmannanshire would have much. And the person in Clackmannanshire could have a much bigger house, indoor swimming pool, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But because it's not worth as much as a central Edinburgh property.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure that works.
Property, there are billions and trillions of pounds in the UK caught up in property. And I don't think any party has really got to grips with how we tax that, because that's where much of our wealth is stored. And because it's stored there, it just sits there. It doesn't benefit anyone apart from the people who eventually sell it.
But the wealth isn't in cash that can be paid to the council. The wealth is in the property itself.
But if the people in those big houses were taxed properly for local goods and services in relation to the value of the property, that would put a lot of money into the coffers. I think it's a perfectly civilized idea. And if rich folk don't want to pay that extra money, tough.